Hello, my name is Teresa Wills, author of Teaching Math at a Distance, Grades K-12, a practical guide to rich remote instruction. I've been teaching online now for a decade, and over that time, I've learned routines, protocols, and activities that increase student voice, foster collaboration, and really give students great experiences interacting with the technology and the mathematics of their learning. These video segments are intended for professional development to support teachers in reimagining their classrooms in an online setting. It is recommended that you pause the videos periodically to reflect and reimagine how you think these strategies could be incorporated in your classroom. Each video segment accompanies a chapter in Part 2 of Teaching Math at a Distance. By visiting the website teresawills.com, you can obtain the blank slide masters and templates needed to use all of these activities in your online professional development or classroom. What would successful students do in an online math class? My students and I use this problem-solving oath at the beginning of any rigorous math instruction. I ask them to read it to themselves as I read it out loud. I, Teresa, promise to try my best. I will make sense of patterns and numbers. I will use manipulatives and drawings. I will make mistakes. I will ask questions. I will listen to other ideas. I will stay engaged by always trying to find another solution or representation. I am a problem solver. I make the world a better place. After reading it out loud, I invite all my students. If you want to use this pledge today, type your name in the chat box. I miss my classroom community. How do I build relationships online? As you watch this segment, look for: how do students share their personality? What structures need to be established to cooperate effectively? How do students interact online? Strong math communities start with teacher expectations, not student rules. These are my teacher expectations. You can count on me. I care about you. I want to keep you safe. I want you to be comfortable and confident online. I value what is unique about you and your personality, and I want to meet your basic needs. And if you need help, please let me know. During my morning meeting every day, I love to get a pulse on students on how they're doing. Students can share through a variety of modalities, including text, images, animated GIFs, and even memes. The important part is that every student gets the opportunity to participate. While you might only call on 2 to 3 students, you can select those 2 to 3 based on pre-reading their original ideas. Even though not every student is selected to share out loud, they still have the opportunity to share their voice and add to the community on the slide. Well-being check-ins are important to any classroom and are just as important in the online classroom. In this example, students use emojis to tell the class how they're feeling that day. There's a familiar poem that reminds everyone that emotions are important. We all have times when we are happy, sad, silly, and mad, and it is okay to have those emotions. Sometimes the teacher might ask the student to elaborate a little bit more in class, or they might make a phone call home to check in on the student, or the teacher can just use this data to let them know what they need to do in the next half hour of their lesson. Breakout rooms are essential because it builds communicators, collaborators, creative and critical thinkers, ethical and global citizens, safe and knowledgeable digital citizens, and they're fundamental for building classroom communities. Breakout rooms give students the opportunity to have small, intimate conversations with a few select students before sharing that to the overall whole class. It is vital that students have opportunities to collaborate together and discuss big mathematical concepts before bringing it to the whole class. It is important to think about the structure that you will use when implementing breakout rooms in your classroom. For example, you might start on day one with just two students in a breakout room for 2 minutes with two really low stakes questions, such as what's your favorite topping on pizza and how often would you like to have pizza? I'll continue this 2 by 2 by 2 strategy until I've seen 4 criteria met by all students. I want to see that they're comfortable using the microphone, that they demonstrate kindness, that they can use the safety protocol, and they can create or implement class norms. Once they've shown mastery, I'll increase the rigor of the breakout room phases. Next, I'll include 4 students per group for 4 minutes with a low-level mathematics task, a task that I know they're going to be successful at, but still includes some mathematical thinking. Do they give each other equitable talk time? Do they show that they value the collaboration? Are they comfortable with the technology? And do they implement the problem-solving oath? Once they've done these 4 things, I know they are ready to move on to larger groups for larger amounts of time and with high-level rich tasks. Reflect and reimagine. How do students share their personality? What structures need to be established to cooperate effectively? How do students interact online? I need to see what my students are thinking and writing. How do I do that online? As you watch these segments, look for what space is available for students to edit. What modalities do students use to express their thinking? How do students show agency? Visual polling is a strategy that allows students to use an icon or an emoji to poll, to share their opinion or understanding about something. In this example, we're using visual polling to determine which of these math teaching practices do we feel best at implementing. This type of activity can be done before or after an activity for students to self-assess their understanding of goals and objectives. Respond and Code is all about the students sharing their ideas and then coding those ideas as a collective group. It begins with an open space, usually just some blank text boxes, and a question for them to answer. Once they've answered it, as a group they need to consider how they're going to classify and code those. Sometimes the teacher can give codes for students to color code. Other times you want the students to develop them themselves. They can do this in breakout rooms, and each different room will have a different coding mechanism, which then can be used in the whole class discussion. Dump and develop is a strategy that uses the group's brain dumps or initial ideas in order to develop a stronger sense of understanding for the question. This enables more student access for those students who like to type, who like to read, who like to talk, and who like to listen. There is a space for every learner. Reflect and reimagine. What space is available for students to edit? What modalities do students use to express their thinking? How do students show agency? How can I do math routines in remote classrooms? As you watch this segment, look for what structures are the same? How are structures modified? How is the math routine inclusive? Let's start with an estimation routine. In the face-to-face classroom, I would collect responses from all of my students by having them raise their hands and calling on them, turn in talks, or when students write on a whiteboard, they can show me visually. Here they're using an interactive slide where every student has access to type their estimate in their given space. We can take this activity one step further and have students copy and paste their responses onto a number line. In the upper grade levels, we could then have them talk about mean, median, mode, and range, and even outliers. This activity gives a great way of collecting lots of student data, having them compare their data with other students, and is inclusive to all kids. Day one, we slowly emerged each of the numbers. Sometimes we can have them emerge simply by putting a text box over it and slowly revealing it. We would also work on repetition and maintaining a beat as we're saying the numbers out loud. Another thing we can sometimes do on day one is include things like shapes and try to guess what the smiley face is before we reveal it. So day one, that had all happened, and I'm going to jump into day two of a 4-day week where I'm going to change the routine each day. So we're here, it's day two, and I'm welcoming the students, and now I'm going to ask you, what patterns do you see within the grid that we did choral counting with yesterday? Go ahead and raise a hand if you see a pattern and you'd like to tell us about what you saw. Kelly, go ahead and start us off.
So for example, in that first column, so I'm looking at the 2, and I'm noticing that as you move down the column, there's a 2 in the ones place every single time.
Ah, so I'm thinking that you're noticing that too. Is that right?
Yes.
And Kelly, did I type your notes? It says there is a 2 in the ones place in the whole column. Would that be what you were saying?
Yes.
Cool. Thank you for sharing, Kelly. Here in the teacher view, not only do I have access to all the transparent tools, but I can also see what students are typing in the chat box. Since my youngest students love to use emojis, I harness this and have them all participate through emojis. When they find something they agree with, they use a happy face. When they love a strategy, they use the heart eyes. And when they have an aha moment, they use the little mind blow emoji. This is how you can get more participation through a modality they already love. On day 3, I use the same choral counting template. This time I add mystery boxes over certain numbers. I'm purposeful to make sure that students can use the strategies in finding that number. My students also learn to use things like the red strategy to find the number 12, the yellow strategy to find the number 34. Sometimes they'll mix 2 strategies together and say, I used the yellow and blue strategy to know that this is 34. On day 4, I again use the same choral counting template. This time, I delete all the initial responses and strategies, and I add mystery boxes along the slide. Students have to remember strategies or use the visual cues to use vocabulary terms that were previously discussed throughout the week. Which one doesn't belong is a math class favorite because there's multiple correct answers. Students begin by moving the no symbol to the area that they think doesn't belong, and they have time to choose multiple sections that don't belong. Then there's a place for them to give a response. Which letter doesn't belong and why? Every student can write the rationale, and if some students prefer to read first, they can read other people's rationales before deciding on their own. Finally, for those students who finish typing early, they can read other students' responses and show a connection by changing the font to bold. Pause this video to reflect and reimagine. What structures are the same? How are structures modified? How is the math routine inclusive? How do my students access and show a variety of representations when doing a rich task? As you watch this segment, look for how are these representations similar to those in a face-to-face classroom? Who is sharing representations? How do students collaborate about their representations? Let's consider the following rich task. Your school wants to unveil a hopscotch course on the 100th day of school. If this pattern continued to 100 boxes, what is the placement of the 100th box? Does it make sense to end at 100? Pause this video and draw out or use manipulatives to show at least 3 representations of how you would expect students to solve this problem. Then hit play and watch all the different representations that students come up with as they solve this problem. During the student work time, the students are placed into small groups within the teleconferencing tool. You can see those small groups on the left-hand side, and you'll also notice how I, as the teacher, am moving in and out of those groups. During that time, I'm having conversations with groups about their thinking. At the same time as having conversations with group 3, for example, I can also look at slides from group 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6. This gives me more opportunity to see a variety of representations, prepare my questions, and be purposeful during my discussion time. Reflect and reimagine. How are these representations similar to those in a face-to-face classroom? Who is sharing representations? How do students collaborate about their representations? I love the workshop model where students are working in small groups at learning stations. How do I use learning stations online? As you watch this segment, look for how are students accountable for learning while in stations? How are students interacting? Who is showing evidence of learning? This is an example of 8 different learning stations. 2 of which that are done in whole group, those are indicated in blue, and 6 that are completed in small groups by purposefully placing students. These 6 activities in gray include a variety of ways that students interact, from independent to partner as small groups, accountability, first by being independent and then small group, and then coming back together for a whole class check for understanding. Check out these examples of how students are interacting in these small groups. If you think you've found one that doesn't belong, try to think of another rationale for a different one that doesn't belong. Why did you say that one doesn't belong? I noticed you wrote 6 out of 10. What does a 6 mean and what does the 10 mean? Oh, it's whole! Try to guess my rule. Oh neat, you showed your thinking 3 different ways.
There's multiple different representations, and we were thinking about, do we want to clone the slides? Do we want to show it on one slide? So we were kind of playing around with it.
What is the math that you're thinking about as you decide where to place those fraction cards?
Comparing to a half or comparing to a whole, how far you are from a half or a whole.
Hang on a sec, let me line this up so I can check.
So we're trying to figure out how many fit inside.
Okay, so we make our own now. It's really neat to see the cards that you picked to sort. Why did you pick those cards?
Well, I know if I had the same common denominator.
Reflect and reimagine. How are students accountable for learning while in stations? How are students interacting? Who is showing evidence of learning? Be sure to visit teresawills.com for more information, templates, videos, and registrations for upcoming professional developments.